Once upon a time, two friends joined forces to bring you the best in horror entertainment. Brian from the north, Tim from the south, each bringing their own unique perspective to the horror community. Movie reviews, Blu-ray releases, beer pairings, games, and more. Welcome to your new home for horror. This is Civil Gore.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the Civil Gore Podcast. I'm your host, Tim. And Brian's not here today. He is on travel, so I thought I'd do something a little different and do a review of a board game I picked up recently, which is Night of the Living Dead Zombicide. This is a variant of the Zombicide board game, which came out in 2012. It's published by Cool Mini or Not, which you might see abbreviated as CMON. And Zombicide is kind of their flagship product. They have released literally dozens of variants of Zombicide over the years. They recently came out a couple years ago with a second edition, which I own, along with two expansions. They did one as Washington, D.C., in which you're fighting zombies inside of the White House, which is pretty cool. And then another one called Fort Hendricks, which is kind of a military-themed zombie game. And all these flavors of Zombicide basically use the same underlying core engine and mechanics. They just differ in the types of zombies that you get in the set, the IP, obviously, the characters and what do they call the survivors that you're playing as differ according to the IP. So Night of the Living Dead was published in 2021, and it was a flavor of Zombicide using the same core mechanics, but based, of course, on the Night of the Living Dead movie. It comes with 66 miniatures. 12 of those are survivor miniatures, so there's 6 survivors in the game that you play as, taken from the movie, like Barbara and Harry and Judy, Tom, Helen, and I'm forgetting one. But anyway, main characters from the movie. And each one of these characters has 2 different modes they can be in. They can be in what is called Romero mode, which is their standard kind of weak, regular, normal movie character role. And then they have a Zombicide role, which they can flip to, which means they're kind of like super-powered, badass superheroes type characters that are not in any way related to the characters in the movie. But to kind of explain that, I kind of have to go back and tell you what Zombicide is in terms of like just the general overview of the game system and the game series. So, like I said, Zombicide first came out in 2012. It's been a huge, like I said, it's CMON's flagship product. They come out with a Kickstarter for a new edition of this game pretty much every year. They've done a Marvel version. They just came out recently with an Army of the Dead version based on the Zack Snyder movie. They're coming out with a DC version. They've done a Western version. Just multiple variants of Zombicide. And it's a cooperative game, so you're not playing against each other. Nobody's playing the zombies. You are working together as a team to complete scenarios, and there's different win conditions for each scenario before you meet the lose condition, which lose condition could vary as well. Sometimes it might be just if one character dies, the whole team loses, or it could be you failed to complete a certain objective, or there's a certain number of zombies on the board, whatever. And you're working together as a team to try to solve the scenario before you meet the lose condition. If you've never played a cooperative game, they're my favorite type of board game, honestly. It typically comes down to being just a big puzzle. You're trying to... In most cooperative games, you have a certain limited number of actions that you can spend per turn. So the game becomes about how can I most efficiently use my limited number of actions to both mitigate whatever bad things are coming my way, because in most cooperative games, something bad happens every round, and still make progress towards my goal, which is my winning condition. And the great thing about cooperative games is most of them can be played solo. So even if you don't have a gaming group or somebody to play with, you can typically play these solos. Zombicide and this Night of the Living Dead edition are perfectly playable solo. I'm playing it solo now. And it's for 1 to 6 players. So In this game, you have to control 6 characters. You have to divvy them up somehow because the game is balanced for all 6 characters. So as a solo player, I'm controlling all six characters or survivors. In a 2-player game, each one would control 3. In a 3-player game, each one would control 2, etc. So you're the survivors, you're working against the zombies, and the zombies are controlled with kind of an AI system to tell you how they're going to move, how they're going to attack, how they're going to activate, etc. The second edition, like I said, came out a couple years ago. It introduced some slight rules changes. Nothing too drastic. I think it just made it a little more forgiving in terms of friendly fire when you're shooting into a crowd that has some of your teammates. A few other little tweaks here and there that made it, I think, for the better. Even though I didn't play a lot of the original first edition Zombicide, so I'm not completely an expert on all the rules changes. Night of the Living Dead version is sometimes considered Zombicide 1.5 because it was where they started introducing some rules changes to the core game, but it wasn't quite up to the 2.0 revisions yet because it came out right before the second edition came out. And it also changes the rules in a way to make it adhere more closely to the movie versus standard Zombicide. So let's talk about standard Zombicide for a minute. It's, I would say, a more humorous-based zombie game. It's not necessarily, I would say, trying to be super scary. It tends to go for kind of over-the-top action, rolling dice and killing zombies, fast-paced gameplay, simplified gameplay, streamlined gameplay. By contrast, I have a game called Escape from Stalingrad Z, which is a zombie World War II game. And that one is very tactical. So you're having to really concentrate on which way your characters are facing. There's very complex rules around grappling zombies and the way everything moves. In Zombicide, a lot of that complexity is kind of stripped away. You're really limited to a number of pretty basic actions. Combat is very simple. It's either you hit or you don't, basically. You're not tracking damage because most zombies die in one hit. And likewise, they're not rolling damage against you. They automatically hit when they attack. Zombies are very simple in terms of their mechanics. They're either moving or they're attacking every turn. So everything is very streamlined, very simple, very fast. And the basic arc of a Zombicide game is that your characters, as they're killing zombies, are becoming more powerful. When I say they're becoming more powerful, they're getting more skills. And skills in Zombicide could be anything from getting an extra action per turn, or they might be slippery, which means they can move away from zombies without incurring any kind of penalty. There's one called Sniper, in which when you're shooting into a zone full of zombies, you can pick your target because there is a priority order there. So as you gain experience, you're leveling up, and the gimmick with Zombicide, and this is kind of true of all Zombicide games, is the more powerful your characters, the harder the game is going to throw zombies at you. So the zombies spawn according to the highest level character you have. So if you have a character who is basically level 2, which means they're in the yellow zone, when you flip over a zombie card to spawn zombies, you're going to be reading off the level 2 spawn chart, which means there's going to be more things coming out, stronger zombies coming out. And when you get really high level, I mean, you have like just waves of stuff coming at you. It's not unusual in a typical Zombicide game to, by the end of the game, even though your characters are powerful, you might have, 20 zombies on the board coming at you at one time. So it's a kind of a balancing act to not level up your characters too fast. And you definitely don't want to level up one character really high while your other characters are low level, because again, the zombies are going to spawn according to the highest level character. So you could have 20 zombies coming out and 5 of your 6 characters are like rookies and don't have the weapons or the skills to deal with this threat. So it's kind of a fun balancing act to kind of manage that curve from everybody being very weak and not many zombies coming out to the end game where everything's just chaotic, ramped up and crazy. So Night of the Living Dead kind of, I would say, tempers this a little bit because, again, it's based on the movie. They can't have it go too crazy away from the film. So they did some things to kind of make it a little more contained and in contrast to regular Zombicide. So let's kind of walk through the first scenario to kind of give you an idea of how the game plays. So Night of the Living Dead has 10 scenarios based on the movie. Obviously, the movie is kind of short and it's contained in just one house. So what they did in this one is they kind of cheated and expanded the scenarios to go outside of what actually happened in the movie. So it's kind of neat because what you're playing is kind of an alternate version of Night of the Living Dead, as like what would happen if they left the house and did this and did that. And you're kind of doing some different things that were not seen in the movie, but still have the same characters from the movie and the same kind of flavor of the movie. So in the first scenario, everyone's in the house and they're trying to barricade all the windows before the undead get in. And I must say, in Night of the Living Dead, the board game, all the zombies are called ghouls because, as you recall in the movie, the term zombie as we know it was not a thing back when that movie came out. That kind of kicked off the actual modern zombie genre. So they were still called ghouls at this time. So they kind of kept that flavor in the game, which I thought was pretty cool. But you're trying to barricade the house up, and you have a map tile, which is your house floor plan, which I think is made up of 4 rooms and kind of a pantry area and a little bit of outside area strip around the entire house. And there are 11 windows you have to board up. There's a couple of doors, a back door, front door, that you can close. And the winning condition is you have to board up all 11 windows, and you cannot have any ghouls left in the house after everything's been boarded up. That's the win condition. So if you have everything boarded up, no ghouls in the house, you win. Meanwhile, obviously ghouls are going to be spawning outside of the house and trying to get in. There are basically 4 types of zombies in the game. The first type is the walker. This is the weakest version. It's just a regular run-of-the-mill zombie, very weak. You have fatties, which are your big, like your giant zombies. They're the ones that have more health. They can basically shield weaker zombies from attacks, and they hit really hard. So their big thing is they're harder to take down because a lot of your weapons only do 1 damage. Fatties have 2 hit points, and you have to hit them for the full 2 hit points. Like, you can't do partial damage and finish them off later. You have to hit them with 2 hit points. So a lot of weapons are basically they're immune to. The third type of zombie is called a breaker. This one's important in Night of the Living Dead because of the importance on barricades. So breakers can open any barricades that they're next to when they activate. So if they don't have somebody to attack, the first thing they're going to do is any barricades in their zone and any doors in their zone, they're just going to blow wide open. So they're very dangerous. And the fourth type are called relatives. These are like actual relatives to you, family members that were turned into the undead. And their big gimmick is when they appear on the board, any character or survivor who is in Zombicide mode instantly flips back to their weaker regular mode. I did want to talk about that because I think I skipped over it or glossed over it. Every survivor in Night of the Living Dead has kind of a neat gimmick for this flavor of Zombicide, and that is they can turn from Romero mode, which is their regular weak version, to this kind of superpowered version that has way more mini skills, and they have other special abilities. Like in the first 2 scenarios, at least, if you're in Zombicide mode, you can search from a special cache of weapons that are very strong, like very powerful ranged weapons like Uzis and shotguns, or very powerful melee weapons like katanas or machetes. You can't get those weapons if you're in your weak Romero mode. The way you switch to the Zombicide mode in the first 2 scenarios, and this could change later on, is there's a rifle. It's just a Winchester rifle, and only one character has it at the start of the scenario. And if they give that to another character, they basically become heroic because they gave their weapon and gave it to another person. So their morale goes up and they turn to Zombicide mode. So you can kind of cheat the system a little bit by staying in the same room and just passing the gun around to get everybody in Zombicide mode, which is what I did. That's how I won the first scenario, but I don't know if that's intentional or not, but that's the way I kind of gamed the system. And once you're in Zombicide mode, there are ways for you to get out of Zombicide mode. And one of those ways are the relative zombies, which I just talked about. When a relative zombie appears on the board, and they can appear either via a normal zombie spawn, or sometimes they can appear when you're searching, which I'll talk about in a little bit. When they appear, every survivor comes out of Zombicide mode because their morale is shot. They just see, oh my God, my daughter is an undead. I mean, they completely lose it, and all their heroics go away, and they turn back into just a regular blubbering mess of a person who just has no special powers. So relative zombies are definitely ones you want to take off the board as quickly as possible. The good news is once you kill a relative, everybody that was in Zombicide mode instantly flips back to Zombicide mode. So they snap back to themselves. So, and they're these relative zombies are very weak. They're just like walkers. So you can take them out pretty easily, and then everybody switches back and everything's good again. So let's walk through the typical scenario. So we start out, we got our 6 characters on the board. We have 2 weapon caches. One is melee weapons and one is ranged. Those cannot be accessed until you flip to Zombicide mode, of course. But there are common items that you can search for in the house as well from a common item deck. So every character starts off with 1 weapon. It's typically a very weak weapon, usually a melee weapon, a table leg or a crowbar or a hammer or something like that. You're in the house, and now you have each survivor has 3 actions that they can take on their turn. One action is you can move. So move 1 space, and the boards in Zombicide are basically divided in what they call zones, which are basically squares. And in the house, it's different rooms. And basically, when you do a move action, you can move 1 square. If you wanted to use 2 move actions, you can move 2 squares. But each square you move costs an action. Then you can also do a search action, and search action means you're just looking around the room you're in to see if you can find something useful. When you do that and you declare a search action, you draw from the item deck, which is in this case is the house item deck, which is the common item deck. And you could find, maybe you find some mason jars that you can make a Molotov cocktail out of if you get some gasoline. You might find, in this first scenario, very important, you find boards, and those boards can be converted into barricades, which you can then put on the windows. So you're going to have to do a lot of searching to find these boards because there's not enough barricades on the map at the start of the scenario to board up every window. So you're going to have to search for those boards. You might find new weapons. You might find perks that you can put in your backpack that give you rerolls on your combat. So things like that. Typically everything is helpful, except, like I mentioned before, there are cards in the search deck that are planted in there that will reveal a relative zombie in your room. Like they just pop out of nowhere, and then you're going to have to deal with that. So there's always a little bit of press your luck in when you search that there could be something bad, but it's typically usually good. So that's your search action. You can only do that once per turn. So you can't just sit there and search 3 times. You can only search once, which is very important because a lot of scenarios depend on you searching, and it would be too overpowered if you could search multiple times. Another action is you can do a trade. So any survivor that's in your zone, you can trade as many items back and forth as you want, which is really nice. This is good when maybe you have an item, like if I had the mason jars and my buddy over here has the gasoline, he can trade me the gasoline, and now I can make a Molotov cocktail out of it. So you definitely are going to be trading items and weapons back and forth because some survivors might be better. They might have a skill that is better for ranged shooting, and if you're better at melee, maybe you trade your gun to the person that's better at range shooting, that kind of thing. So there's going to be a lot of trading done. The 4th action you can do is you can open and close doors and barricades. So you can take an action to close a door, open a door, remove a barricade if you have a weapon that can do it. You got to have like a crowbar or something to be able to do that, or put up a barricade. Anytime you're kind of interacting with an objective, that typically costs an action. And then the last action you can do, of course, is combat. So if you're trying to hit a zombie, you can take a shot at him with a gun, or you can swing at him with a baseball bat or whatever. that would take an action as well. So that's your 3 action types you can take. And when you're starting out, in the first scenario, of course, there's no zombies on the board. So typically you're trying to search as fast as possible, get to rooms, try to get barricades put up, etc. And search for better weapons, obviously. So when every survivor has taken their turn, they've taken their 3 actions, it's the zombie's turn. And what happens in the zombie phase is, first, every zombie on the board will activate. And what activate means is they're going to either move or they're going to attack. If there is a survivor in the same zone as they are, they're going to instantly attack. They're going to bite them. There's no way to dodge this. There's no way to not have this happen. So you're going to take a damage. Every survivor only has 3 hit points. So 3 bites and you're dead. And typically being dead means game over. So you have to be very careful not to be in a zone with a zombie when their activation starts. If there is no survivor in the zone where the zombie is, they're going to move. And they have rules for movement. Typically, they're going to move towards a zone with the largest number of survivors within their line of sight. There's line of sight rules. Obviously, you can't see through walls. You can only see a certain distance into a building. You can see pretty much unlimited outside unless there's woods or a cornfield. But there's very explicit line of sight rules in the rule book. So first, the zombie is going to move towards the survivors it can see. If it cannot see any survivors, and in the first scenario in this game, typically they can't see a survivor because if windows are boarded up or something, they can't see into the house or whatever. They're going to move to get to the zone with the most number of survivors. Even if they can't get to that zone, can't get into that zone, they're going to move towards it. And this brings up an interesting strategy with Zombicide, and it's true of all the Zombicide games, is you can, because the zombies are very simple in how they move, you can lure them to where you need them to be. And this is very important strategy, especially in Zombicide 2nd Edition that I've played, because I've played probably that one more than any other version, is sometimes, you might have zombies getting ready to beat down a door, and if they get in that door, you're going to be having a terrible time. So what you could do is you can run a survivor out and get into their line of sight to basically lure the zombies away from that door and towards your survivor. And because they're only typically moving one space at a time and they're slow, a lot of times you can buy yourself a lot of time just by distracting them versus trying to have them bust in the door and try to kill them all. So it becomes a very important strategy, and a lot of some of the scenarios really depend on you exploiting that mechanic to be able to lure zombies around to locations where you need them to be. So in Night of the Living Dead, especially this first scenario, what you'll find is the zombies tend to kind of stay outside because unless there's a breaker who can get into your barricade, they really have no way to get in. So they're going to kind of be circling around the outside of the house, and you're really more worried about, and this is an easy scenario. It's the first scenario. It's supposed to be easy. You're really more worried about finding the materials to put up the barricades than you are about actually fighting zombies, because if you're doing your job correctly, they shouldn't be inside the house to begin with. So it's kind of fun because it becomes this big kind of juggling act. I kind of compared it to like the spinning plates jugglers, because you're trying to put up barricades, and while you're trying to put up barricades, you have breaker zombies on the outside that are taking them back down. So you're kind of having to deal with them, but at the same time, you got to have enough actions to search, to find boards, to put up more barricades. So it becomes this real juggling act, and it's a lot of fun. Again, it's a fairly easy scenario. Most Zombicide games have a number of easy scenarios, a number of medium scenarios, and then a number of hard scenarios that you have to get through. And hopefully by the time you've gone through the easy and the medium, you've gotten the skill set you need to be able to take on the harder challenges down the road. The second scenario, and I'm not going to give up all these because I haven't even looked at all of these, but the second scenario is kind of, you're still in the same house, everything's been barricaded, you're good to go, but now you got to find the keys because there's a car outside that you think you can use to escape. So to find the keys, you're going to have to search through the entire common item deck, and only after you've searched the entire deck do you find the keys. So this one is interesting because it becomes about how quickly you can get through the searching of the item deck. And the lose condition is if at any time at the end of a player phase there is a ghoul inside the house, you lose instantly. So this one becomes very strategic, and you don't want to be the last survivor to go. You don't want to search and then all of a sudden a relative zombie pops up and you can't deal with them, and then you instantly lose the game. So you have to be very careful on who searches, when they search, and making sure that any zombies in the house are immediately killed so that you don't have that losing condition pop up. So interesting in how the different scenarios play out. Each scenario's winning condition and lose condition is going to cause you to implement a different strategy. And that's what I love about the Zombicide games, because all the scenarios are basically a big puzzle. And the puzzle is trying to figure out, how do I meet my winning condition with what I have on the board, with the survivors I have, with the skill sets I have, before things get so out of hand and I have so many zombies spawning that I can't deal with it all at the same time. So it kind of becomes a little bit of a race. So what did I think of the game overall? There are some differences between this and normal Zombicide. Like I said, it's kind of a 1.5 rule set, so there are some very, very minor rule differences. But the big thing is they really streamlined it to make it more in line with the movie. So compared to a typical Zombicide game, it's not as combat heavy, at least not in the first few scenarios, which may or may not be to your liking. If you're a Zombicide fan that just likes to roll large chunks of dice and kill multiple zombies, this one's a lot more subdued because it's trying to keep in with the themes of the movie, where you're really trying to avoid the zombies at all costs. You're not trying to engage with them. So I've heard a lot of people that really like this version because of that. They like that it kind of makes you think a little bit more about avoidance versus straight up combat. Depending on your play style, that may or may not be a plus. It also streamlines the item decks, kind of streamlines some rules. Like there's a rule in Zombicide where if you shoot a gun, you create noise, and that will attract zombies. They took that noise rule out completely in this version, so you don't have to worry about noise. You don't have to worry about shooting weapons. That's not a mechanic in this version of the game. So that's a very much simplified rule set. And it tends to be overall more puzzly because it's trying to keep in with scenes from the movie. So like looking for keys or trying to barricade the house, that kind of thing. It tends to be a little more puzzly than normal Zombicide. Although I would say even regular Zombicide is fairly puzzly in and of itself. But it's a little more, I guess, regular Zombicide tends to be a little more open in terms of how you accomplish your objectives. For instance, like in regular Zombicide, I remember there was one mission where you had to search like 3 different supply caches in different areas of the map, different buildings of the map. And you could do that in any order, any way you wanted to. And there's multiple ways you could approach that. Whereas in this game, the scenarios tend to be a little tighter, and you really have a specific thing you have to do. And there's really a very limited way you can do that. Again, I think it's fantastic because I feel like it really brings through the feel of the movie. If you're not a fan of the movie, if you're not familiar with the movie, I could see where that might feel a little constraining versus thematic. So again, depends on where you stand. If you're wanting like pure action, whatever, I would say, you're better off with like getting a Zombicide base game. But if you're really wanting the feel of the Night of the Living Dead movie and you want to experience the film in board game form, this would be the way to go. The miniatures are great. I actually painted mine in a black and white version. I've seen a lot of people doing this. So all my zombies are in black and white and gray. So I thought that was pretty cool. I haven't painted the survivors yet, but I think I might do the regular characters in black and white and then do the zombified versions of them, or the Zombicide versions of them in color, which I think would be cool because sometimes it's hard to keep track of which one's in Zombicide mode and which one's not. But overall, I really love this game. As a Zombicide fan, I knew I would like it because of the mechanics. I was already familiar with the mechanics, so I had no problems there. But I was not prepared for how thematic it felt in terms of bringing across the experience of the movie. Like I really felt when I was playing like the survivors in the film, like frantically trying to board up windows before something got in, or, searching for some weapon that I could use because I had, these giant fatty zombies on the other side of the wall and I needed a Molotov cocktail and I needed to search for mason jars and gasoline. It felt very frantic, and it was definitely a different feel from normal Zombicide, even though it was using the same underlying rule set and the same underlying mechanics. So, check this one out. It's a little on the expensive side. The CMON games typically are, because they have such a large number of miniatures. That tends to up the price. This one typically retails for around $90. I got it on sale for significantly less than that, so keep an eye out for sales. But it's a great game, especially for a horror fan, especially if you're a Night of the Living Dead fan. It's such a great implementation of the movie, and then it kind of goes beyond the movie, which is even better. If that price level is too high, but you still want to experience Zombicide and try to get a taste for it, they have some lower priced options. Some of their Marvel zombie sets, they have some standalone kind of they're almost like expansions, but they're standalone, so you can buy them and play them completely self-contained. But they're smaller number of miniatures, smaller number of scenarios, but they're significantly cheaper. So if you just want to get an idea to see if the game is something that appeals to you, the rule set appeals to you, then you could pick up one of those like Marvel zombie sets and give that a shot and see if you liked it enough to get into the kind of the bigger editions. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this little review of Night of the Living Dead Zombicide. If you like these kind of reviews of these board games, I've got tons of horror board games. If you ever want to hear any of these minisodes again, just let me know. And I will send us a line at civilgorepodcast@gmail.com. Drop us a line on Facebook or X, Twitter, Instagram, and say, hey, I really like the board game review. Please do some more of those. I would be happy to do that. I've got actually a bunch of zombie games, some other kind of horror board games that I would love to talk about. So just let me know, and we'll see you guys back here next week. Take care.